ever wished like participating in democracy was as engaging as your favorite mobile game,
Hmm.
you know? I mean, it might not be so far-fetched,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, it's a fascinating idea, right?
Yeah, and that's actually what we're diving into today, so welcome to the deep dive.
Yes.
We are going to be talking about gamified democracy, uh, essentially taking elements from game design and using those to boost civic engagement.
It's pretty wild, some of the stuff they're doing.
It is.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting and kind of surprising, frankly, how effective some of this stuff is.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you think about like, okay, points and badges, like, is that really going to get people to the polls, right?
Right.
But the data is pretty compelling.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you an example,
Mhm.
back in the 2018 U.S. midterms, there were some apps that used gamification elements, and they actually saw a 5% increase in voter turnout,
5%.
which is pretty substantial. Yeah, when you think about it, like, election outcomes can be decided by much smaller margins than that.
Totally. And it makes sense, right? Like when we think about why games are so engaging.
Right.
It's because they tap into our brain's reward system.
Okay.
So like when we win in a game, right, our brain releases dopamine
Right.
that gives us this feeling of pleasure, right? Like we feel good, we feel rewarded, and that makes us want to keep playing, makes us want to repeat those behaviors. And so gamified democracy, is really about trying to harness those same mechanics to encourage things like voting or attending town hall meetings or just being more engaged in the democratic process.
So essentially, like, kind of tricking our brains into, becoming better citizens.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not really tricking. It's more about understanding what motivates us
Right.
and using that to, kind of nudge people in the right direction.
Right, right. But, we talk about gamified democracy, but I think it's still kind of unclear, like, what does that actually look like?
Right.
Beyond just, like, getting points for voting, like, is it really more than that?
It really is. Yeah. I mean, so think about it. Like in a lot of games, you have things like progress bars.
Right.
You see how far you've come, how much further you have to go, and that's a really powerful motivator, right?
Yeah.
It gives us this sense of progress and it keeps us going. And so you could imagine a gamified voting app that shows you like how many people in your age group have already voted. And that could encourage you to join in, and, to contribute, or maybe you earn badges for voting in every election.
Okay.
There's a lot of ways you could apply these kinds of game mechanics.
So you're not just voting, you're actually, like, you're contributing to a larger goal. It's it's like being part of a team or something like
That's
that.
exactly, yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay, cool. So are there any actual examples, like real world examples of this that have been successful?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, vote.org, that website that helps people register to vote.
Hmm.
They actually used a progress bar showing, how many people in each state had registered.
Oh, cool.
And that really seemed to create like this sense of friendly competition, right?
Right.
Like, you don't want your state to fall behind. And it seems like that really did encourage people to participate.
That's a really good example. It makes it feel like you said, like a team effort. It's not just you doing your thing. It's like you're part of something bigger.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've talked about like these progress bars. We've talked about badges and points and stuff like that. But I think when people think about gamification, they also think about things like augmented reality, like using AR to
Yeah.
to make things more interactive. Um, especially something like a town hall meeting, which, let's be honest, aren't the most exciting events.
Yeah, no, not always.
So, like, is that something that could actually work, like using AR to kind of like spice things up?
It's an interesting idea, right? I mean, you could imagine an app that turns attending a town hall meeting into like an interactive challenge,
Okay.
right? Like maybe you earn points for asking questions or engaging in discussions.
Right.
It could make those events a lot more appealing, especially for younger people who are, used to these kinds of interactive experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. But I mean, AR sounds, obviously that sounds really fun and interesting, but I think, we can't ignore like the potential downsides here.
Right.
Gamifying something is as important as democracy. Like,
Mhm.
is there a risk that we're trivializing complex issues?
Mhm.
Or, even worse, like, could this be used to manipulate people?
Yeah, those are some serious concerns for sure. And I think, one example that comes to mind is what if a system rewards you for voting for a specific candidate?
Right.
Right. Like that's crossing a line. That's not just encouraging participation. That's influencing choices,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's something we definitely want to avoid. And then there's also the issue of, people who aren't tech savvy or, maybe just don't enjoy games.
Right.
Are they going to be left behind? Is this going to create a kind of digital divide in terms of who's able to participate in democracy?
Yeah, those are all really important points. So it seems like, while gamification obviously has a lot of potential, it really comes down to how it's designed. Like
Yeah.
that's the key thing here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what role do UX designers, the people who actually design these experiences, what role do they play in all this?
They're critical. I mean, they're the ones who are, on the front lines making sure that these systems are designed ethically and responsibly.
Right.
So they need to be thinking about things like transparency, making sure that users understand how the system works, what data is being collected, how it's being used. They need to offer clear opt-out options, right? Like if people don't want to participate in the gamified aspects, they should be able to easily opt out. And they need to create, diverse designs, right? Like not everyone likes the same kinds of games. So you need to cater to different preferences, offer different ways for people to engage.
Okay, so it really is like a balancing act. It's like trying to find that sweet spot where, it's engaging and it's fun and it's encouraging people to participate, but it's not crossing that line into manipulation or exclusion. Yeah. Okay. So I guess, like, looking ahead then, what could the future of gamified democracy actually look like? Like, what are some of the possibilities here?
Ooh, that's a fun question. Well, imagine like personalized rewards tailored to your interests, right?
Yeah.
Like powered by artificial intelligence. So
Mhm.
maybe you earn badges for consistently voting on issues related to, climate change, because that's something you're passionate about.
Right.
Or maybe you get like access to exclusive information about those issues, kind of like a behind the scenes look.
Oh, interesting.
There's also, countries like Sweden are actually exploring integrating gamification directly into their e-voting platforms.
Wow.
So, it could become even more seamless and integrated into the actual voting process.
That sounds pretty amazing. I mean, I can see how that would be really engaging, but I also kind of worry, like, is it going to get too complicated?
Yeah.
What about people who, like we said before, who aren't necessarily like gamers?
Yeah.
Are they going to be like overwhelmed by all this?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. And that's where, again, those UX designers are so important. Like, they need to be focusing on making these systems simple and accessible for everyone,
Right.
regardless of their, tech skills or their familiarity with gaming. And I think, building trust through transparency was also crucial here, right? Like, if people feel like they're being manipulated or if they don't understand how the system works,
Right.
the whole thing falls apart.
Right. Right. It's all about trust. It's about transparency. It's about accessibility.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really fascinating discussion. It seems like, gamification has the potential to be a really powerful tool for getting people more involved, more engaged in democracy.
Mm-hmm.
But like we've been saying, it really all comes down to how it's implemented. It's got to be thoughtful. It's got to be ethical.
Absolutely. I think, the takeaway here is that, we have this opportunity to really reimagine what it means to participate in democracy.
Right.
Like imagine a world where it is as engaging and rewarding as our favorite games, right? Like
Right.
that's a future we can create. It's not, some far off sci-fi thing. It's something that's within reach. But it requires, careful consideration. It requires responsible design. It requires us to really think about, what we want our democracy to look like.
And what role do we all want to play, right,
Exactly.
in shaping that future?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah.
And I encourage everyone to think about, what we've talked about today and what role you want to play in shaping the future of democracy.
Absolutely. It's an exciting time to be alive, for sure.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.